Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while, so I was thinking we could just jump back into reading a book together. It's called The Interior Castle or the Mansions by St. Teresa of Avila in 1577. So this is chapter 3. I don't know, the chapters are kind of like weird in this book. I feel like whatever, but it says, of the prayer of recollection which God generally gives the soul before granting it that last described, its effects also those of the prayer of divine consolations described in the last chapter. The effects of divine consolations are very numerous. Before describing them, I will speak of another kind of prayer which usually precedes them. I need not say much on this subject, having written about it elsewhere. This is a kind of recollection which, I believe, is supernatural. There is no occasion to retire, nor to shut the eyes, nor does it depend on anything exterior. Involuntarily, the eyes suddenly close and solitude is found. Without any labor of one's own, the temple of which I spoke is reared for the soul in which to pray. The senses and exterior surroundings appear to lose their hold. While the spirit gradually regains its lost sovereignty, some say the soul enters into itself, others that it rises above itself. I can say nothing about these terms, but had better speak of the subject as I understand it. You will probably grasp my meaning, although perhaps I may be the only person who understands it. Let us imagine that the senses and powers of the soul, which I compared in my allegory to the inhabitants of the castle, have fled and joined the enemy outside. After long days and years of absence, perceiving how great has been their loss, they return to the neighborhood of the castle, but cannot manage to re-enter it. For their evil habits are hard to break off. Still, they are no longer traitors, and they wander about outside. The king, who holds his court within it, sees their goodwill, and out of his great mercy, desires them to return to him. Like a good shepherd, he plays so sweetly on his pipes that although scarcely hearing it, they recognize his call and no longer wander but return, like lost sheep, to the mansions. So strong is this passer's power over his flock that they abandon the worldly cares which misled them and re-enter the castle. I think I never put this matter so clearly before. To seek God within ourselves avails us far more than to look for him amongst creatures. St. Augustine tells us how he found the Almighty within his own soul after having long sought him elsewhere. This recollection helps us greatly when God bestows it upon us. But do not fancy you can gain it by thinking of God dwelling within you, or by imagining him as present in your soul. This is a good practice and an excellent kind of meditation, for it is founded on the fact that God resides within us. It is not, however, the prayer of recollection. For the divine assistance, everyone can practice this, but what I mean is quite a different thing. Sometimes, before they have begun to think of God, the powers of the soul find themselves within the castle. I know not by what means they entered, nor how they heard the shepherd's pipe. The ears perceived no sound, but the soul is keenly conscious of a delicious sense of recollection experienced by those who enjoy this favor, which I cannot describe more clearly. I think I read somewhere that the soul is then like a tortoise or sea urchin, which retreats into itself. Those who said this no doubt understood what they were talking about, but these creatures can withdraw into themselves at will, while here it is not in our power to retire to ourselves, unless God gives us the grace. In my opinion, His Majesty only bestows this favor on those who have renounced the world, in desire at least, if their state of life does not permit their doing so in fact. He thus specifically calls them to devote themselves to spiritual things. If they allow him power to act freely, he will bestow still greater graces on those whom he thus begins calling into a higher life. Those who enjoy this recollection should thank God fervently. It is of the highest importance for them to realize the value of this favor, gratitude for which would prepare them to receive still more signal graces. Some books advise that this is a preparation for hearing what our Lord may say to us we should keep our minds at rest, waiting to see what he will work into our souls. But unless His Majesty has begun to suspend our faculties, I cannot understand how are we to stop thinking without doing ourselves more harm than good. This point has been much debated by those learned in spiritual matters. I confess my want of humility in having been unable to yield to their opinion. Someone told me of a certain book written on the subject by the saintly Friar Peter of Alcantara. I should have submitted to his decision, knowing that he was competent to judge, but on reading it, I found he agreed with me that the mind must act until called to recollection by love, although he stated it in other words. Possibly I may be mistaken, but I rely on these reasons. Firstly, he who reasons less and tries to do least does most in spiritual matters. We should make our petitions like beggars before a powerful and rich emperor. Then, with downcast eyes, humbly wait. When he secretly shows us he hears our prayers, it is well to be silent, as he has drawn us into his presence. There would then be no harm in trying to keep our minds at rest. That is to say, if we can. If, however, the king makes no sign of listening or of seeing us, there is no need to stand inert like a dolt, which the soul would resemble if it continued inactive. In this case, its dryness would greatly increase, and the imagination would be made more restless than before by its very effort to think of nothing. Our Lord wishes us at such a time to offer Him our petitions and to place ourselves in His presence. He knows what is best for us. I believe that human efforts avail nothing in these matters, which His Majesty appears to reserve to Himself, setting this limit to our powers. In many other things, such as penances, good works, and prayers, with His aid we can help ourselves as far as human weakness will allow. The second reason is that these interior operations, being sweet and peaceful, any painful effort does us more harm than good. By painful effort, I mean any forcible restraint we place on ourselves, such as holding our breath. We should rather abandon our soul into the hands of God, leaving Him to do as He chooses with us, as far as possible, forgetting all self-interest and resigning ourselves entirely to His will. The third reason is that the very effort to think of nothing excites our imagination the more. The fourth is because we render God the most true and acceptable service by caring only for His honor and glory and forgetting ourselves, our advantages, comfort, and happiness. How can we be self-oblivious while keeping ourselves under such strict control that we are afraid to move, or even to think, or to leave our minds enough liberty to desire God's greater glory and to rejoice in the glory which He possesses? When His Majesty wishes the mind to rest from working, He employs it in another manner, giving it a light and knowledge far above any obtainable by its own efforts and absorbing it entirely into Himself. Then, though it knows not how, it is filled with wisdom, such as it could never gain for itself by striving to suspend the thoughts. God gave us faculties for our use. Each of them will receive its proper reward. Then do not let us try to charm them to sleep, but permit them to do their work until divinely called into something higher. In my opinion, when God chooses to place the soul in this mansion, it is best for it to do as I advised, and then endeavor, without force or disturbance, to keep free from wandering thoughts. No effort, however, should be made to suspend the intellect and imagination entirely from acting, for it is well to remember God's presence and to consider who He is. If transported out of itself by its feelings, well and good, but let it not try to understand what is passing within it. For this favor is bestowed on the will, which should be left to enjoy it in peace, only making loving aspirations occasionally. Although in this kind of prayer the soul makes no effort towards it, yet often, for a very short time, the mind ceases to think at all. I explained elsewhere why this occurs during the spiritual state. On first speaking of the fourth mansions, I told you I had mentioned divine consolations before the prayer of recollection. The latter should have come first, as it is far inferior to consolations, of which it is the commencement. Recollection does not require us to give up meditation, nor to cease using our intellect. In the prayer of quiet, when the water flows from the spring itself and not through conduits, the mind ceases to act. It is forced to do so, although it does not understand what is happening, and so wanders hither and thither in bewilderment, finding no place for rest. Meanwhile, the will, entirely united to God, is much disturbed by the tumult of the thoughts. No notice, however, should be taken of them, or they would cause the loss of a great part of the favor the soul is enjoying. Let the spirit ignore these distractions and abandon itself in the arms of divine love. His Majesty will teach it how best to act, which chiefly consists in its recognizing its unworthiness of so great a good and occupying itself in thanking him for it. In order to treat of the prayer of recollection, I passed over in silence the effects and symptoms to be found in souls thus favored by God. Divine consolations evidently cause a dilation or enlargement of the soul that may be compared to water flowing from a spring into a basin which has no outlet, but it is so constructed as to increase in size in proportion to the quantity poured into it. God seemed to work the same effect by this prayer, besides giving many other marvelous graces, so preparing and disposing the soul to contain all he intends to give it. After interior sweetness and dilation, the soul is not so restrained as formerly in God's service, but possesses much more liberty of spirit. It is no longer distressed by the terror of hell, for though more anxious than ever not to offend God, it has lost servile fear and feels sure that one day it will possess its Lord. It does not dread the loss of health by austerities, believing there is nothing it could not do by his grace. It is more desirous than before of doing penance. Greater indifference is felt for sufferings, because faith being stronger, it trusts that if born for God, he will give the grace to endure them patiently. Indeed, such a one at times even longs for trials, having a most ardent desire to do something for his sake. As the soul better understands the divine majesty, it realizes more vividly its own baseness. Divine consolation shows it how vile are earthly pleasures. By gradually withdrawing from them, it gains greater self-mastery. In short, its virtues are increased, and it will not cease to advance in perfection, unless it turns back and offends God. Should it act thus, it would lose everything, however high the state it may have reached. It is not to be supposed that all these effects are produced merely by God's having shown these favors once or twice. They must be received continually, for it is on their frequent reception that the whole welfare of the soul depends. I strongly urge those who have reached this state to avoid most carefully all occasions of offending God. The soul is not yet fully established in virtue, but it is like a newborn babe, first feeding at its mother's breast. If it leaves her, what can it do but die? I greatly fear that when a soul to whom God has granted this favor discontinues prayer except under urgent necessity, it will, unless it returns to the practice at once, go from bad to worse. I realized the danger of such a case, having had the grief of witnessing the fall of persons I knew, through their withdrawal from him who sought with so much love to make himself their friend, as he proved by his treatment of them. I urgently warn such persons not to run the risk of sinning, for the devil would rather gain one of these souls than many to whom our Lord does not grant such graces, as the former may cause him severe loss by leading others to follow their example, and may even render great service to the Church of God. Were there no other reason except that he saw the special love His Majesty bore these people, it would suffice to make Satan frantic to destroy God's work in them, so that they might be lost eternally. Therefore they suffer grievous temptations, and if they fall lower than others. You, my sisters, are free from such dangers, as far as we can tell. God keep you from pride and vain glory. The devil sometimes offers counterfeits of the graces I have mentioned. This can easily be detected, the effects being exactly contrary to those of genuine ones. Although I have spoken of it elsewhere, I wish to warn you here of a special danger to which those who practice prayer are subject, particularly women, whose weakness of constitution makes them more liable to such mistakes. On account of their penances, prayer, and vigils, or even merely because debility of health, some persons cannot receive spiritual consolation without being overcome by it. On feeling any interior joy, their bodies being languid and weak, they fall into a slumber. They call it spiritual sleep, which is a more advanced stage of what I have described. They think the soul shares in it as well as the body, and abandon themselves into a sort of intoxication. The more they lose self-control, the more do their feelings get possession of them, because the frame becomes more feeble. They fancy this is a trance and call it one, but I call it nonsense. It does nothing but waste their time and injure their health. This state lasted with a certain person for 8 hours, during which time she was neither insensible nor had she any thought of God. She was cured by being made to eat and sleep well and leave off some of her penances. Her recovery was owing to someone who understood her case. Hitherto she had unintentionally deceived both her confessor and other people as well as herself. I feel quite sure the devil had been at work here to serve his own ends, and he was beginning to gain a great deal from it. It should be known that when God bestows such favors on the soul, although there may be languor both of mind and body, it is not shared by the soul, which feels great delight at seeing itself so near to God. Nor does this state ever continue for more than a very short time. Although the soul may become absorbed again, yet, as I said, unless already feeble, the body suffers neither exhaustion nor pain. I advise any of you who experience the latter to tell the prioress and to divert your thoughts as much as possible from such matters. The superior should prevent such a nun from spending more than a very few hours in prayer, and should make her eat and sleep well until her usual strength is restored, if she has lost it in this way. If the nun's constitution is so delicate that this does not suffice, let her believe me when I tell her that God only calls her to the active life. There must be such people in monasteries. Employ her in the various offices and be careful that she is never left very long alone, otherwise she will entirely lose her health. This treatment will be a great mortification to her. Our Lord tests her love for him by the way in which she bears his absence. He may be pleased after a time to restore her strength. If not, she will make as much progress and earn as great a reward by vocal prayer and obedience, and she would have done by contemplation and perhaps more. There are people, some of whom I have known, whose minds and imaginations are so active as to fancy they see whatever they think about, which is very dangerous. Perhaps I may treat of this later on, but cannot do so now. I have dwelt at length on this mansion, as I believe it to be one of the most souls enter. As the natural is combined with the supernatural, the devil can do more harm here than later on, when God does not leave him so many opportunities. May God be forever praised. Amen. So, okay, I think that from what I'm gathering, that this chapter is about once you let God in, you'll be tested. And let me see, I had made some notes somewhere. Okay, so right here it says, when His Majesty wishes the mind to rest from working, he employs it in another manner, giving it a light and knowledge far above any obtainable by his own efforts and absorbing it entirely into himself. Then, though it knows not how, it is filled with wisdom, such as it could never gain for itself by striving to suspend the thoughts. God gave us faculties for our use. Each of them will receive its proper reward. Then do not let us try to charm them to sleep, but permit them to do their work until divinely called to do something higher. I'm not really sure why I made a note about that, but I guess it's just that, like, I don't know. I wanted to make a video today because I'm like struggling kind of, and it's like this is a good outlet for me. And this chapter was kind of about being tested and possibly not passing the test. And if you don't pass, then you need to fervently try to redeem yourself, I guess, in a way. And maybe that's why I'm struggling. Maybe it's, I think everything happens for a reason. There's no coincidences. So it's like this chapter I'm being drawn to read today, and it's about not passing a test, which maybe I didn't do. And this is where I find it like so difficult to tell. And there's a quote I kept thinking about when I was reading this, and it's from the Bible it's like from Timothy 2. I'm not really sure the number exactly, but it's like God did not give us the spirit of confusion, but of power and love and a sound mind, something along those lines. And I always think about that when I feel like confused or like I'm being like manipulated a little bit or something along those lines, because it's like this is not of God. But then I'm feeling like now maybe it's a test to see like how will I react to the confusion and manipulation. And unfortunately, I usually react by getting upset and removing myself, which probably isn't always the best thing to do, because you're supposed to stay calm and put forth love, and I really struggle there. I really struggle with that. I struggle to not get upset and not just like shut down. I struggle to say like, I see that I'm being manipulated, and yet I still have love for you the way that God would have for me. But then it's like the fight I have in my head is I'm still being manipulated. So obviously the person that I'm around is like not great for me. And it's not like blatant manipulation. Nobody's like straight up like being a terrible person. It's always like covert manipulation. It's like, and I just see it really easily. And an example is like when someone wants something from you and they go about it by like insulting or like blaming, it's like they want love and affection, and instead of just saying like, hey, I need love, they go about it by saying like, I guess you don't love me, or like, I guess, you're not going to come sit with me, or you're not going to come hold me, or you're not going to come, it's like, and that it's like most people just do that? I probably do it. I know I do it. I know I do it. Rarely, because I see it so well, but like sometimes if I'm like caught off guard, or I'm like really tired, or I'm really like just like having a bad day, or other stuff on my mind, it's like I'll like make a snide remark, and really it's because I just want to be like held or loved. And I'm like, but it's like I'm manipulating it, because I'm like expecting that like if I act this way, you will then be like, oh no, it's not that, I love you, you know? When really that's never the way that people react to manipulation, because they can feel it in the energy. Like it's like so potent that you might not know you're doing it, and they might not even know that you're doing it, but their energy can feel the manipulation happening. So it's like, instead of you just being straightforward about your needs, you're trying to like manipulate it out of them by making them feel bad. And so like back to what I was saying, it's like I'm still around someone who's trying to manipulate my feeling, my emotions, my, you know, my moods, and so it's like, while I should probably meet that with love and patience and understanding, it's like so hard, because it's like, you know, the polarity of it is like, I know that I should be like God and be patient, you know, the virtues of like patience and forgiveness and understanding and all of this, but it's like I'm also being manipulated. So like I also want to remove myself from the situation. But then it's like I also manipulate sometimes. So it's like having that understanding of like, we're all human, we're not God. Which is sad, because it's just like, where do you draw the line? I struggle with that so bad. It's like, where do you draw the line between like, I know that this is not right, and I know I should give grace, because nobody's perfect. I don't know. And I guess it just like depends on the severity of the issue, when like, but to me it's like, I hate being in that energy of manipulation so much that like it literally like repels me. And so it's like any degree of it feels like inundating to me, where most people like don't see it to that extreme, and so they just like brush it off as like a joke, or like they'll just like let it go like with an eye roll, or you know what I mean? Like I just can't, like I have to call you out on it, and I have to like leave, like I have to just like get away from it, because like it irks my soul so bad. But it's like also not a good thing, you know? It's like I should also be able to like give grace and just like let it go sometimes. I don't know. I also made a note right here which says, divine consolations evidently cause a dilation or enlargement of the soul that may be compared to water flowing from a spring into a basin which has no outlet, but is constructed as to increase in size and proportion to the quantity poured into it. God seems to work the same effect by this prayer, besides giving many other marvelous graces, so preparing and disposing the soul to contain all he intends to give it. To increase the size and proportion to the quantity poured into it. So like, I don't really remember like why I kept making notes next to these things, like just to like draw my attention back. But again, nothing happens. Everything happens for a reason. Nothing happens by mistake. So it's like, you know, maybe that's the answer to the question I was just asking, is like, maybe the amount of grace and the amount of understanding you should give is based on this proportion and quantity being poured in. So it's like, do they give you grace? Do they give you understanding? You know, yeah, nobody's perfect, but like, how do they react when you're imperfect? And is giving grace just rolling the eyes and like letting it go? I don't know. Because it's like, then you also long-term end up in a situation where like needs are unmet and nobody knows how to talk about it. And I don't want that for my life either. You know, I don't want to ignore something for so long that resentment builds. And then we're just in like a situation that's like waiting to explode. I would rather, when I do something wrong or I'm in the wrong, I would rather somebody like say like, hey, like, I'm giving you grace, you know, but then I don't do that. I don't do that either. So it's like, maybe that's what I need to work on. Let's write it down. So I need to work on expressing my grace. Like, instead of just being like, I will not be manipulated, like I'm removing myself from this, I need to say like, this is upsetting me and I'm willing to move forward. But I want you to know so this is upsetting me and I want to move forward, but I want you to know that I'm hurt or that I need love, that what is it that I'm hurt? I need love. I guess it's like a fill in the blank. So this is what I just wrote down, just so like everybody's following along. It says, I need to work on expressing my grace. I need to say in the moment, instead of shutting down, that this is upsetting me and I want to move forward, but I want you to know like I'm hurt, or I need love right now, or whatever your like core need is. I don't know, man. Relationships are fucking hard, and it's like, does anyone actually have a good one? Really? Genuinely. Not just like what you post on social media and like what you brag about to your friends, or and not all of them are like the super fucking toxic. Like, a lot of people have done a lot of healing and still find it like unable to work with people. I don't know. I feel like I've come so far on my healing journey and I like understand so much and I see so deeply. But like in the moment, it's so hard to de-escalate your emotions. I don't know. I find that's so hard for me. Is to not just be like offended or like hurt. and like stay in this place of like grace and love and like I don't know, what other note did I make? It says, greater indifference is felt for sufferings because faith being stronger, it trusts that if born for God, he will give the grace to endure them patiently. Indeed, such a one at times even longs for trials, having a most ardent desire to do something for his sake. And I think I made a mark for this because like, I wonder this, it's like, do I subconsciously continue to like put myself in hurtful situations, like in hope, like because my soul is hoping to grow? And I feel like that's really how she talks in this book, is just like that, like our soul is working with God to do things that like we can't comprehend or understand or like know why it's happening. And it's just like, does everything need to be hard so that we can like learn? Because Earth is a school and we're here to learn, and everything ebbs and flows and moves. It's constant vibration. And so achieving your most desired relationship or your most desired outcome, like once that happens, new issues are brought to light, are, what is that word? Revealed. And then it's about conquering those. And it's like, I feel like that's like where I really run into issues. Okay, so my phone died. So I'm just going to clip this on to the end. It might not match exactly, but I was saying that the issue I run into is that I have no problem healing in isolation. I have no problem writing and journaling and doing poetry and making collages. And if you guys are interested in seeing my collages, my Instagram is where I post them, and it's the same as my YouTube, Micah7153. But I don't have any issue doing that alone when I'm alone. I'm great at resting and recuperating and going internal and asking questions and finding answers and all of that. But like once I get into relationship, partnership, it becomes more difficult, because then it's like I'm working through relational issues in a relationship that's triggering the issues, which is difficult, because then it's like I don't have the perfect responses, and instead of journaling and it not being right, and then journaling the next day and I've like come to a new place with it, and like I understand myself, it's like when you're in a relationship, there's another person that it's like, well, maybe they don't, maybe your initial reaction wasn't great, and then they're going to hold you to that and not see the reaction that you come to at a later time, the understanding you come to at a later time. So, and I'm guilty of that too. It's like the initial reaction that somebody gives me is kind of like what I keep in my mind. It's like the saying, like, first impressions matter. It's like the next time you argue, your mind's going to go back to like their initial reaction, not like the reaction that not the understanding that they came to days later, and maybe that's a personal issue with myself and the people that I am with, or maybe it's a human issue. I'm not sure, but I had recorded a whole end of this video, but I didn't realize that my phone had died. So I'm trying to just like recap, but I don't really remember the points I was making. So I'm just going to close this out, but I appreciate you guys because, you know, comment on my videos, interact with me for the sole purpose of like, I do all of this in isolation. I live alone. I heal alone. I have a job where I am basically working alone. I'm a very internal person, and it's so hard to relate to people. I don't know. I guess it's just hard to relate to people. So it's like interact with me. And so that it forces me to interact and see other perspectives, which I am good at seeing other perspectives. I don't always think I'm right, but it's also hard for me to not run away, if that makes sense. It's like, I see your perspective, but like also I want to go be by myself. So I don't know, but I don't know. I appreciate you guys listening, and mostly I make these videos for me. Like, so many times I've like had a situation come up where I go back to my older videos and I watch them because it's like the advice I'm giving is the advice I need, you know. And I just wish it was easier to figure all this out, but life ain't easy. But it is. Life is super easy. We complicate it, you know. That's what they say in an AA or an NA. It's like a simple program for complicated people, you know. Because the whole premise is like, if you don't put it in your hand, you can't put it in your body, you know. So like, if you literally don't touch it, like you can't, there's no way to ingest it. And we make that so difficult. It's, I don't know, whatever. I'm rambling. So have a great day, guys. And I love you. Bye.